The whisper that stopped a king. My hands should not have been shaking. But they were. Because invisibility only protects you until the moment someone truly looks at you. For 7 months, I had survived the umbral court by mastering the art of being unnoticed. 7 months of learning where not to stand, when not to breathe too loudly, how to move like furniture in halls where furniture had longer lifespans than servants. The rules were never written. They were whispered. Passed mouth to ear in the servants' quarters like a prayer meant to keep the dead quiet. Do not speak unless commanded. Do not look directly at the nobles. Do not look at the king ever. And most importantly, do not touch the crown unless your hands are steadier than your heart. Tonight, the crown was in my hands. The high nocturne chamber breathed with ancient power. Cold stone walls rising like cathedral ribs. Obsidian floors polished to a mirror black that reflected candlelight and moonlight alike. Moonlight poured through the vaulted windows, painting the chamber in silver and ash, casting the assembled vampire nobles into pale statues, their crimson eyes fixed forward in perfect obedience. They did not see me. They were not meant to. Servants existed only in the space between commands. King Arden Velcroft stood before the obsidian dais, motionless, not breathing, not shifting his weight. He was centuries old, older than wars, older than the bloodlines that bowed before him. His presence heavy enough to bend the air itself. Pale hair flowed past his shoulders like frostlit silk. His eyes a deep royal crimson, the mark of the first bloodlines, the kind of gaze that ended rebellions without a word. I had been chosen for this task because my hands did not tremble, because I knew how to lift the crown without slicing skin on its black-silver thorns, because I had learned how to hide fear so completely it became discipline. I stepped forward when summoned, each step silent, each breath measured. The crown was warm, still holding the echo of ancient rituals, rubies embedded along its rim like watching eyes that had witnessed coronations and executions. As I raised it, my fingertips brushed the king's temples, his skin cold, unnaturally so, like touching winter itself. That was when I saw it. Through the archway behind him, past banners and noble cloaks, past ceremonial spears and silver-inlaid pillars, one of the blood sentinels shifted his stance, just slightly. Most would not have noticed, but I had learned to survive by noticing what others dismissed. His name was Cashin Morv, a decorated sentinel, 5 decades sworn to the king's protection. I had watched his patrols for months, memorized the rhythm of his steps, the balance of his weight. Tonight his weight was wrong. His right shoulder dipped lower, his stance angled forward, his hand hovering too close to his hip beneath the crimson cloak. Moonlight caught the line of something sharp beneath the fabric, straight, narrow, deliberate, a blade, not ceremonial, not sanctioned, a quick-draw placement, the kind used when you expect to move fast. My heart slammed against my ribs, but my hands did not shake. Stillness had saved me once before, when my family was erased from court records, when forged papers turned a noble daughter into a nameless maid. Cashin's eyes flicked, to the king, to the doors, back to his blade. That look, I had seen it before. The night guards came from my bloodline, determined, committed, already decided. I adjusted the crown as if nothing was wrong, leaned closer under the excuse of alignment. My lips barely moved. Your guard has a weapon, I whispered, the words shaped only for immortal hearing. Don't leave tonight. The king went utterly still. The chamber temperature dropped, not by magic, but by fear. His eyes shifted not toward me, but toward Cashin. 3 heartbeats. Nothing moved, not the nobles, not the guards, not even the candle flames. Then the king's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath skin untouched by age. What did you say? His voice was soft, but it carried death in its echo. I did not repeat myself. Instead, I stepped back, smoothed my black uniform, reached for the ceremonial sash as cover. To the court, the ritual continued. To the king, I spoke again. Cashin Morv, I murmured, folding the sash. Hip blade, quick draw position. He keeps checking the processional doors. Wrong posture for a sanctioned guard. For the first time, the king looked directly at me. The weight of his attention felt like standing before an avalanche. Silent, inevitable. For a moment, I thought I had miscalculated. Kings did not accept warnings from servants, especially not disposable ones. Then his voice cut through the chamber. Thorn. Another sentinel emerged from the shadows. Older, broader, silver threaded through dark hair. His hand already on his sword. Cancel the procession, the king commanded. I will receive the court here. No one leaves. Murmurs rippled through the nobles. Confusion fracturing centuries of ritual. Cashin's hand moved closer to his weapon. The king's gaze never left me. You, he said quietly. Eastern study. Third floor. Wait. Speak to no one. I bowed. Heart racing. Face perfectly calm. The Eastern study was a room people entered. And did not always leave. As I walked away, the court parted as if I were nothing. And for the first time, I realized invisibility no longer protected me. Something else did. Or condemned me. Behind me steel rang. Voices rose. A shout was cut short. The umbral court had lived on predictability. And tonight, I had shattered it with a whisper. By the time the study door closed behind me, I understood the truth. I had not saved a king. I had marked myself. And in a palace ruled by immortals, being noticed was the most dangerous thing of all. The room where truths bleed. The Eastern study did not smell like death, but it smelled like truth. And in the umbral court, truth was often more dangerous than blood. The door closed behind me without a sound, sealing me inside a room carved from centuries of secrets. Dark wood walls etched with sigils I did not understand. Narrow windows overlooking moonlit gardens that felt impossibly far away. I stood in the center. Hands folded. Spine straight. Breathing shallow and controlled. Moving felt like an invitation. And invitations in this palace were rarely safe. I counted my heartbeats. Not seconds. Heartbeats. 3,000. 3,200. 3,247. The silence pressed against my ears. Heavy, waiting. When the door opened, I did not turn. I did not need to. The air changed. Thickened. Cool. King Arden Velcroft entered alone. No guards. No witnesses. No ceremony. The crown still rested upon his head. But the ceremonial cloak was gone, leaving him in black formal wear threaded with silver, the attire of judgment, not celebration. Without the distance of the throne, he was more dangerous, less symbol, more predator. Sit, he said. I obeyed, lowering myself into the carved chair before the obsidian desk, aware that many had sat here before me, aware that not all had stood again. He did not sit. Instead he moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, moonlight turning his pale hair to silver. Cashin Morv has served me for 53 years, he said calmly, decorated in 3 blood wars, sworn under an oath that cannot be broken without consequence. He turned, and his crimson eyes found mine with surgical precision. Tell me, he said, how a servant of 7 months saw what 5 decades of loyalty concealed. Not why did you speak? Not how dare you? How did you know? My hand stayed still in my lap, though fear screamed through every nerve. His weight was wrong, I said quietly. Blood sentinels distribute their weight evenly. Cashin shifted 3 times in 20 breaths. His right shoulder dipped. The king's expression did not change, but the room felt sharper somehow. Continue. His hand placement, I said. Sanctioned guards clasped their hands behind their backs during ceremony. His stayed near his hip. The fabric caught on something straight-edged. A pause. From the dais, the king said, you could see this. Yes, your majesty. How? I polish weapons in the armory, I said. I know what different hilts look like beneath cloth. He moved closer. Silent, controlled, stopping just far enough to remind me he chose restraint. And his eyes, I continued. He looked at the processional doors repeatedly. Anticipation. Then he looked at you, fear. He was waiting for something beyond those doors. The king studied me as if I were a puzzle carved into flesh. Where did you learn to read pupils? My brother gambled, I said. The lie smooth practiced. I learned to tell when he was bluffing. Not entirely false. I had learned to read faces when survival demanded it. In the days before my family vanished. You are afraid of me, the king said. Yes. Yet you warned me. Yes. Why? The question struck deeper than the blade ever could. I met his eyes. And this time, I did not look away. Because watching you die, I said softly, would have been worse than whatever punishment follows speaking. Something flickered across his face. Not softness, but recognition. Cashin carried a relic blade, he said, turning away. Consecrated steel. Capable of piercing royal wards. He was not alone. My breath caught. 3 other sentinels were positioned along the route, he continued. They intended to strike where the wards thinned during procession. I felt cold spread through my chest. He has been detained, the king said. He cannot lie. The way he said it made my skin crawl. The conspiracy runs deep, he finished. Deep enough that your warning saved not only my life but this court. Silence fell between us. Heavy, measured. You will remain in the palace, he said at last. Your quarters are moved to the 3rd floor. My personal staff. My heart skipped. You will attend private councils, he continued. You will observe. You will report. Your Majesty, I began. You are not here because of mercy, he interrupted sharply. You are here because you see what others miss. He faced me fully now. 600 years, he said. I surrounded myself with immortals who forgot vigilance. You have not. Then colder. The moment that changes, so does your usefulness. He turned toward the door. Paused. Pray your observations remain accurate. The guards escorted me to my new chamber. Larger, warmer. With a real bed and real windows. Protection disguised as privilege. Sleep did not come. Every footstep in the corridor felt like correction. Like the palace reconsidering my survival. 3 hours before dawn, they summoned me again. The judgment hall lay beneath the palace, carved into bedrock older than the city itself. Chains lined the walls. Sigils glowed faintly in the stone. Cassian knelt at the center, bound, his face bloodied, but his eyes still burning with defiance. When he saw me, something twisted in his expression. Recognition, hatred. You, he spat. Servant filth. The king did not look at him. Speak, the king commanded, and Cassian did. Under binding, his lies torn apart, his allies named. When judgment fell, it was swift, absolute, and when it was over, the king did something unexpected. He dismissed the hall, and looked at me. You saw what immortals ignored, he said quietly, because you know what it is to be hunted. For the first time, his voice held something else. Respect. And in that moment, I understood. The vampire king was no longer just watching me. He was protecting me. The king who stood between her and the world. The palace changed after that night. Not in ways the nobles spoke of, but in the way shadows shifted when I walked past. In the way guards straightened when my footsteps echoed down the corridor. I was still a maid. Still wore black service linen. Still lowered my gaze when commanded. But I was no longer invisible. And in the Umbriel court, being seen was a double-edged blade. They whispered about me in places they thought I could not hear. Servants first, then lesser nobles. She survived judgment. She spoke to the king and lived. She must have bewitched him. Fear dressed itself as rumor, and rumor sharpened into resentment. The 3rd floor felt closer to the throne room than the servants' quarters ever had. Closer to power, closer to danger. I learned quickly that protection did not mean safety. It meant scrutiny. The king summoned me to councils where my name was never spoken, where I stood behind pillars and curtains, listening while ancient vampires debated war, treaties, blood tithes. They forgot I was there. Until I wasn't. Once, during a dispute over border wards, I noticed a noble flinch when the king mentioned a southern stronghold. Just a breath too sharp. A hand tightening around a goblet. When I spoke of it later, quietly, carefully, the king did not dismiss me. He listened. The punishments that followed were discreet, but unmistakable, and the court began to understand something dangerous. I was not powerful, but I was protected by power. That realization made some careful. It made others cruel. The first incident happened in the servants' hall, a place meant to be invisible, where nobility rarely descended. A noblewoman blocked my path, her gown crimson silk, her smile sharp. You've grown bold, she said softly. Standing where you do not belong. I bowed, as I always had. I stand where I am ordered. Her hand struck my cheek. Fast, deliberate, sending me to the floor. The room froze. No one spoke. No one intervened. Because servants were replaceable. Remember your place, she said, turning away. That night, the noblewoman was removed from court. Her house stripped of titles for striking royal staff. No announcement was made. But the message spread faster than blood sent. The king had not raised his voice, had not publicly defended me. He had simply erased consequences. After that, no one touched me again. But their eyes followed me, calculating, resentful. The king began to speak to me more. Not kindly, not gently, but deliberately. Why do you notice fear faster than ambition? He asked one night as we walked the garden paths, moonlight threading between iron-leaf trees. Because ambition hides, I said. Fear leaks. He considered that. You do not ask for reward, he said later. I ask to live, I answered. That earned a pause, a longer look. Slowly, subtly. His distance shifted. He stopped dismissing me after counsels, started asking what I saw, what I felt. Once, when a visiting lord sneered at my presence, the king did not correct him. He simply rested his hand on the arm of the throne and said nothing. The lord paled and apologized to me without being told. Respect, I learned, did not require affection, only certainty. The assassination conspiracy did not end with Cashin. It coiled deeper into the court, nobles allied with rival bloodlines, ancient grudges resurfacing. I was followed twice, subtly, badly. The king noticed before I did. The second time, he stepped into the corridor himself, blocking the path of two cloaked figures. They fled. That night, he assigned a sentinel to my door, not as guard, but as warning. You are not a pawn, he told me quietly. Anyone who believes otherwise will be corrected. I should have felt safe. Instead, my chest tightened. Your Majesty, I said, if they are striking at you through me, then they misunderstand, he interrupted. They will not reach you to reach me. His voice was calm, absolute. Something inside me shifted then, something dangerous, because protection like that was not casual. It was personal, and personal attachments were deadly in a court built on eternity. The king grew quieter after that, more withdrawn. I saw it in the way he watched the court, the way his gaze lingered on corruption he had tolerated for centuries. You remind me of something I forgot, he said once, standing at the window of the eastern study. What is that? I asked. That power means nothing, he replied, if it cannot protect what is right in front of you. The words stayed with me. So did the way his eyes softened when he said them. The night everything changed. It did not begin with violence. It began with a child, a human boy, smuggled into the palace kitchens, burned, half-starved, his blood tainted with poison meant for vampires. I found him crying beneath a table, too weak to run. I carried him to the king myself. When the nobles protested, when the sentinels hesitated, the king rose from his throne, and for the first time, the court saw something they had never seen before. The vampire king knelt. He listened as I explained, as I begged him to let me try to save the boy. You know medicine, he said slowly. I know desperation, I answered, and I know how to keep someone alive. He let me. When the boy lived, when the poison was neutralized, when the court realized a human maid had saved a child they could not, the whispers changed, from resentment to awe. And in that moment, standing beside the throne with blood on my hands and resolve in my spine, I understood the truth. I was no longer surviving the Umbriel court, I was changing it, and the vampire king was watching me do it, not as a ruler watching a subject, but as a man realizing something precious had entered his immortal world. The crown that bowed to kindness. The dawn did not rise over the Umbriel court. It waited, as if the world itself understood that something ancient was about to end. The palace stood divided, wings sealed by wards, courtyards patrolled by sentinels whose loyalties had been tested and retested through the night. Those who had plotted retreated to old alliances. Those who had watched in silence now chose sides. Neutrality had become impossible. I stood in the eastern chamber, dressed not as a maid, not as a noble, but as myself. No silks, no jewels, only simple dark fabric and the quiet certainty of who I was. The king had ordered me to remain hidden, but I knew better now. Running was a form of permission, and I had spent my life denying permission to fear. When the summons came, it was not whispered. It rang through the palace like a challenge. The high nocturne chamber filled again, not with ceremony, but with judgment. The conspirators stood bound, their titles stripped before they could speak them, their power gone the moment it was exposed. Cashin's allies knelt where they had once commanded, faces pale, eyes hollow. The eldest noble stepped forward, rage barely restrained. You will doom this court, he snarled, by elevating a human relic. The king rose from the throne slowly, every movement deliberate. You doomed this court, he replied calmly, the moment you mistook power for entitlement. He gestured, and I stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the chamber. She speaks the first tongue, one noble hissed. She alters blood and ward alike. Yes, the king said. And she chose to use it to save life, not claim dominion. The noble laughed bitterly. And that makes her dangerous. No, the king replied. That makes her necessary. He turned to me then, his expression unreadable. Do you wish to rule? He asked. Do you wish power? The chamber stilled. I thought of my mother, scrubbing blood from stone floors, speaking ancient words only when lives depended on them. I wish, I said clearly, for no one to be punished for being small. The words carried, not as magic, but as truth. Something shifted, not in the wards, not in the bloodlines, in the people. The king raised his voice for the final time. By law of crown and blood, he declared, those who conspired against this court are stripped, exiled, or executed according to their crimes. Judgment fell swiftly, without cruelty, without spectacle, instant karma, clean and final. When it was done, the king descended from the throne, not to command, but to stand beside me. You changed this court, he said quietly, not by force but by refusing to become what harmed you. I didn't change it alone, I answered. You allowed it. He studied me then, not as a king, not as an immortal, but as a man who had ruled too long without being seen. You could leave, he said, live freely beyond these walls. And you, I asked. I would remain, he said, and remember what it cost to forget. Silence stretched between us, soft, unafraid. I won't be your queen, I said gently. I won't be a symbol. His lips curved just barely. I would never cage you with a crown, he replied. I would walk beside you if you choose. Choice. At last, I stayed, not as a servant, not as royalty, but as something new, a bridge, a reminder, a living refusal to let power erase compassion. The court rebuilt itself slowly, with rules rewritten not in blood, but in memory, and the vampire king ruled differently after that, listening more, judging less. As for us, there was no sudden romance, no dramatic claim, only quiet evenings, shared silences, and a bond formed not from destiny, but from respect. The truth she was never meant to survive. The court did not forgive miracles. It tolerated them only until fear outweighed gratitude. The boy I saved became a symbol, not of mercy, but of disruption. A human child surviving poison meant for immortals unsettled the balance. It reminded the nobles of something they despised, that power could fail, and kindness could succeed. They began watching me openly now, no longer whispering behind pillars, no longer pretending I was invisible. Eyes followed me through corridors, measured my steps, counted my breaths. The king noticed before I did. You are no longer background, he said one evening, his voice quiet as we stood in the eastern study. Courts do not forgive those who change the rules. I never meant to, I replied. I only did what was in front of me. That, he said turning to face me, is exactly why they fear you. The council was called at dusk. Not ceremonial, not announced, a closed gathering. Old blood only. I was not invited, but I was summoned. They stood in a half-circle around the obsidian table, faces pale, expressions carved from resentment and restraint. You overstep, one noble said coldly, addressing the king, by allowing a human servant to influence court matters. Another followed. She practices forbidden knowledge. She saved a poisoned child, the king said evenly. A child that should have died, a voice replied, and revealed weakness. That word cracked through the chamber like glass. Weakness. The king's gaze sharpened. She has become a liability, the eldest noble declared. Remove her or we will. Silence followed. Heavy, expectant. I felt the shift before it happened. The subtle change in the air that meant truth could no longer hide. The king did not deny their accusation. Instead he turned to me. Tell them, he said quietly. My breath caught. Tell them what? I asked. What you have not told me, he replied. What you hide even from yourself. The room seemed to tilt. I had prayed this moment would never come, had built my survival on silence, on erasure. But the king was watching me now, not as a ruler, not as a protector, as someone asking for truth. My mother, I began, was a court healer. Murmurs rippled. Human, someone scoffed. No, I said softly. She was something else. I felt it then. The thing that had always been wrong in my blood. the thing that had made poisons behave differently beneath my hands. She spoke the old tongue, I continued. The language before crowns, before bloodlines. A noble laughed, until I looked at him, and spoke. The words rose unbidden, ancient, resonant, alive. The room shuddered. Sigils carved into the walls glowed faintly, responding to a voice they recognized. Shock rippled through the chamber. The first tongue, someone whispered. That's impossible. The king did not look surprised, only grim. It was not chance you noticed the blade, he said quietly, or the poison. The eldest noble stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. She is a relic, he snarled. A threat. Destroy her. Guards moved. Steel whispered free. I did not step back. The king did. He placed himself between me and the court. No, he said. One word. Final. Immovable. You would choose her, the noble spat. Over your court. I choose the truth, the king replied. And justice. The court erupted. Accusations. Threats. Ancient grudges spilling into the open. That night, the Umbriel court fractured. Loyalists rallied. Others fled. Some plotted openly. I was placed under guard. Not imprisoned, but hidden. The king came to me before dawn. You should hate me, he said, standing in the doorway. I pulled you into this. I chose to speak, I answered. I always knew silence would end eventually. He looked at me then. Really looked. You are not weak, he said. You never were. The words settled deep. King, they will come for you, he continued. Not because you are dangerous, but because you cannot be controlled. And you, I asked, what will you do? He stepped closer. Close enough that I felt the cold of his presence. The restraint behind it. I will end this, he said, even if it costs me everything. In that moment, I saw the truth I had been avoiding. This was no longer about protection, or duty, or survival. This was about choice. And the Vampire King had just chosen me.